Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Man, I am super nervous about today because this is an all-time icon, somebody that I'm humbled. There's nobody else that I looked up to more than this man right here, Mr. Rick Clunn, and I have to pinch myself that I'm sitting by him, and it's just the honest truth. I think the absolute world of you. When I was 7th grade, I wanted to be you, and I followed you ever since. And please don't. I mean,
Yeah, shut up. Will you shut up?
I know, and what's so cool about it is that you're still competing and still winning, and I just hope that I can be half that. You know, it's just amazing, and I'm just humbled and honored to be sitting here beside you. We do a little YouTube deal where I get a pro, never of your caliber, but one close to that, and I just want to ask you, like, for the younger audience, so much of our crowd's a younger audience, it seems like. How did you get to where you're at? Or maybe advice that you would have for a young angler that wants to be in your shoes?
You know, and that's not really an easy one. Because what you call a young angler now is so different than what we called a young angler when I started. Because I didn't start till I was 26 years old. Okay, most of the young anglers out there now are starting in high school.
Yes, sir.
And going to college, and then they're coming into the bigger circuits very, very quickly. And so the path is really quite a bit different. I can probably tell them more what they shouldn't do than what they should do.
Just as important.
I know, it is. But at the same time, I think all of us were motivated by something that really finally gave us the courage to make the jump. And I think that's, it's strange because I know exactly what I wanted to, but the final thing that motivated me was my father-in-law. And every Sunday that I was over at their house, we'd be watching golf. And he loved golf, as much as I loved fishing. And if somewhere during that match, he'd be going, "How could I beat them guys? I could have beat them guys. I could have done it. I could have done it." And I kept listening to him, and listening to him. And finally, hit me one day. I'll be doing that someday if I don't at least try. And that's what kind of gave me the courage. Well, at least go out there and try. If you fail, you fail, but at least you know that you tried. And you'll have an answer to really, could you have done that? A better one, and you won't have that regret. So, and I think all these young anglers now trigger off, and something gives them that final bit of courage. They have nowadays a lot of support, I think, at the family level. I'm not sure you did, but there wasn't a whole, and my family did, but they did just because they loved me. They didn't think they thought I was crazy, But my dad, when I told him I'm quitting Exxon Oil Company, this great giant corporation with benefits and retirement and all that, he looks at me and goes, "Really? You're quitting the job?" And he said, "And you're going fishing?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad." And he said, "Okay." He said, "If that's what you want to do, you go do it." He said, "But you're going to starve to death." And he was right. He was right the first 2 or 3 years. And so back then, there wasn't a clear path to where you were going. In many ways, a lot of us, like especially Roland and Bill Dance and those guys, they were the pioneers. They were kind of cutting that initial path through the jungle. And then a few of us come along and maybe cut it a little further. And so everybody now that's come into it has had a little bit wider, more open, longer path that they can follow. And it's bona fide now. That's one of the neatest things about coming to Bass Pro Shop. The very first one of these I come to, it was the very first time I felt good about being an outdoorsman.
Really?
I'd won 3 classics by then, and I still didn't feel.
Wow.
I did go broke, but I'd gotten back due to the classics, a lot of the financial stuff I'd lost. But the thing I still didn't get back was the respect that you want doing something you love to do.
Right.
And fishing, back when I grew up, if you were fishing, you were playing hooky. If I was working at Exxon, you could talk about golf all day long. But the minute you mention fishing, you're wasting corporate time.
Huh.
So it wasn't, accepted like some other mainstream sports were. So again, that was a different creature than what a lot of these young people are dealing with now. Now the survival and the struggle is no different. I mean, in fact, it may be even tougher now due to the amount of competition they have. and the amount of resource they have to try to get to support them. And when I work with like people like Cody Huff, the young angler from Ava, Missouri, that I've known since he was a sophomore in high school, playing quarterback for Ava High School, is we don't talk fishing as much as we do the mental side. In other words, how you retain a positive attitude even in the worst situations, and also how do you navigate the business of fishing, because you've had to learn that.
Yes, sir.
I've had to learn it, and I'm still not great at it, I'll be honest. But so there's it's a lot more complex in some ways now. Back in my day, you could win one tournament and get pretty good notoriety. Nowadays, if it's not, the Super Bowl of the circuit, yeah, you get a little recognition, but people forget that regular win overnight. In the old days, that was worth something for a while. Now you got the bar of excellence has gone up, and so you can't. I see way too many young anglers come in. There's two types of young anglers, and I have parents come up to me, "Can my son make it?" And I said, "Well, that's an impossible question for me to answer." I said, and the only way I could answer it, if I really knew him, it's when he hits rock bottom. I said, if he's on top and he's got plenty of support, and even when he's not doing well, that passion that you see when you first meet a young angler is pretty high. But a lot of them that haven't ever had to struggle, when they hit rock bottom, that passion goes away. So be aware, it's like my dad said, be aware when you're going hungry that you keep that passion alive. And remember why you're doing it. And because that's the one thing that most anglers forget, I don't care how old they are, they forget the original reason they're doing it. And that's because they love it. And you have to survive, you have to make money, but when those become more important than that love you had for it, then it's going to be tough.
It's a great answer, great answer. What is it that you love about the sport? Like, what has been your driving factor since you started?
It's the most amazing thing. There's really a couple of really big things, and I didn't even realize them for a long time. But one of the number one things is, the number one thing, and most people will ever never know this, even for themselves, nothing in my life has made me feel more alive. Even when my dad came true and I was broke, and then by all outward appearances, I was a complete failure. My house had been taken away. I'd come home, my wife and baby, the old Hollywood story, were sitting on the porch, been locked out of our house. I came home from a tournament. By all outward, opinions, I'd failed. And you know what? The strangest thing, I like myself more than I've ever had in my whole life. And that was just simply because I was following my heart. And I knew that I would never put more energy into something than I would put into this. And I just needed to keep pouring that energy into it and working anyway. And I knew it was going to happen. I probably was the only one that did. And even my family, I really give them credit, because I know they thought I'd totally lost it. Never said a negative word. So why is that? And the other thing is that you truly do become more alive, because we live in this encapsulated society. How often do people ask you if fish is smart?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on how you define smart. And a fish is smart. If you define smart as being alive, they're so much smarter than we are, because they're using all their senses at their highest level.
That brings me to something that I read about you that I am really trying to learn right now. We've been talking about all this new technology. I read everything you ever put out, but I remember reading an article, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have a few of the details, but you had a group of fish, and I want to say it was on Conroe, I think, that when you pulled over them, you wouldn't cast, you'd turn all your depth finders off, and I want to say this was back in the 80s, and you'd have to sit there for 15 minutes, and then you would start fishing for them. Am I correct in reading that somewhere about you? I mean,
yeah, it was, and actually probably late 70s and early 80s. But Randy Fight and I were guiding. It was Conroe. It was well, I started on it when I was 2 years old. By then, it was about 6, 7 years old. And then it started fishing offshore structure. And, you know, a lot. And Randy was probably still one of the very best at it with the old graph paper recorders. But there was, and then we had all the other guys on the lake too. We all shared spots, but this one spot we didn't share. But most of the guys over time had learned to pull over and see if fish were there before they even stopped, okay? And that's what you did most places, and that was okay. And you could back off and then fish them and catch them. But this one spot, you could never do that with. You could, if once you pulled over it, it was over. You were not. You could back off and wait forever, and you're not going to catch them. They knew you were there, and these fish weren't fished, and it wasn't like a community hole or something. And so it was, but it was still to this day, it made me realize, as you well know nowadays, what were all these different sounds and things we're sending at them that, and what I was fixing to say earlier about their awareness, they know you're there. They may be reacting to it in different ways, but those fish, literally, we had to go up there and just blind cast that spot. Stay away, as far away from it as you could, and blind cast it. Don't dare pull over it with those depth finders. Yeah. But so, you know, it's. But that's getting back to your other question. That's what I love about fishing. There's no 2 days the same. How can you get bored in something that no 2 days are ever the same? I mean, it's my video game. And I know how all the young people are caught up in video games. That's my video game.
Yes.
You know, I'm trying to put that puzzle together, refigure it every day, and it changes every day.
I think as a fisherman, I need to be more aware of what I am emitting from everything in my boat to what it's putting in their environment.
No, absolutely, and it's getting back again to. And that's one of the other great gifts of fishing to me is the fact that it allowed me to turn my senses to a higher level than I would have if I'd stayed at Exxon Corporate America in a downtown office building encapsulated by our society. And thus it allows me to better understand that I'm dealing with a species that senses have to be at their highest every day or they don't survive. And so then you really try to become more familiar with how it uses his sight, how he uses the lateral line, how he smells, how he does all these things, because that's going to determine a lot of your success in catching that fish and fishing. Weather is no longer the greatest variable. Biggest, it's us. We're out there. We affect them more than anything else now. And so how are we doing that? We need to understand how that's happening.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. There's a million questions I'd like to ask you, but just if I was to get to ask one more question, give me one of your most memorable fish catches, or maybe it's one of your most memorable tournaments, like just something that I would just like to hear a story of something that's super memorable to you.
I know what it is, but it's not exactly what
one
of those you just asked. Because, you know, there's so many fish catches, and obviously there's incredible ones. And we've had a few of those days where you touch perfection. You know, I can't get any more perfect than this, and it's an amazing feeling. But still, even though I've had a couple days like that, and they're amazing, probably the most amazing day was when I spent with President Bush.
Really?
Yeah, because it really gave me another reason I really love fishing. And I actually learned it in guiding, but he really brought it. Anyway, George Bush, after I won the Classic in 1984, called Ray Scott and said, I want to fish with Rick Clunn. And he was president of the United States when he did that. And Ray, you know, you never trusted Ray when he called you up. Hey, Rick, George wants to fish. George who? The president. He wants to fish with you. And I said, really? Well, where do you want me to meet him? He says, he told me, he was in Houston and I lived at LaPorte at that time. And he said, you meet him at Ellington Air Force Base and he's going to take you on Air Force One and we're going to fly up to my lake. I'm still in a daze. And anyway, to make a long story short, we did. Got on the plane, flew all the way up to his lake, went to his private lake. And this is about a 50-acre lake. I think you've probably been to Ray's Lake over the years. No. Anyway, and every 50 yards around the lake is a Secret Service guy in a coat and tie and a little earphone. No apparent gun. But you look behind him, 50 yards behind every one of them was a fully armored guy with automatic weapons. But so I'm just being blown away, and there's a frogman swimming around in the lake, checking out our boat before we get in it. And then we start to fish, and this frogman keeps following us around.
You got a guy in the water following you around.
No, he's in the boat by then,
Okay.
but he did get in the water to go under the boat, check the boat, check all the stumps in the lake for bombs or something. But anyway, so we start fishing, and there was two things. The first one was, I said, why is that frogman? I asked the president, I said, why is that frogman following us around? And he kind of started laughing. He said, well, they're afraid if the boat sinks, they'll have to save me. And then I go, well, what about me? And he said, son, you're on your own. But then, that wasn't the best. And later on, because every time he'd catch a good one, and that lake was full of good ones, I'd go, George, that's a good one. No, I'm sorry, Mr. President. And I did that about 3 times. And I'll never forget this, to answer that initial question. I said, the 3rd time I said, George, I'm sorry. He touched me and said, Rick, today, you're not a world championship angler, and I'm not the president of the United States. We're just 2 guys who love to fish. That's awesome. And I thought about that for a long time, because when we get in a boat, this world has so many differences. That day, what he was saying, we're not Republican, we're not Democrat, we're not, black, white, green, woman, male, blah, blah, blah. We're just 2 guys that share something we really love to do together. So,
kind of what this whole company's been built on, that we're sitting.
True, and it's very, very true. And it makes you wish that we would celebrate our things we share as much as we fight about the things that we are different about. So.
That's amazing. I just want to say, for a lot of young guys that may be watching this, Rick Clunn's won 4 Bassmaster Classics. There's only one other person in the history that's ever done that, and that's Kevin Van Dam, the next greatest bass angler in the industry. I don't know how many your accolades go on and on and on. I know for a fact you were the world's greatest angler, and that was a voted on really neat achievement. But I'm sitting next to the all-time legend in my mind that there ever will be, there ever was, there ever anything of all future. And it's just an honor to be able to sit beside you. You've got an amazing wife, 2 great sons, River and Sage, and it's a true honor to be able to sit here beside you, and I just can't thank you enough.
Well, the first time you were ever around me a lot, you'd always look at me with admiration, but you also had this look in your eye, I'm going to get him one of these days.
Not you, but I just wanted to compete.
I know it wasn't that. But that was something you were trying to look up to and achieve, and all of us had that. We're all created by those who came before us.
Well, if you think about how many people's lives you've touched, maybe you've sparked, I'm one of them. I'm here, and a big part of it is me following you as a young angler, and I just want to say thank you. All you've taught us, like I sit here and I think about all I've learned in bass fishing and pattern fishing. He was the godfather of developing a pattern and breaking down a lake and putting it in zones and stuff that we all take for granted, like it's our information. This is the man that taught us way before we had internet, way before we had social media. You had some great books, great series that is just really amazing how many people you have taught about this great sport, and I just cannot thank you enough.
Comes full circle.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Same here.